You think we're weak? John Williams' voice was low, almost a growl, as his eyes locked onto the alien diplomat across the room. Lyra, the tall, graceful representative of an ancient and powerful alien empire, gave him a look of pure disdain, her violet eyes gleaming with the arrogance of someone who thought themselves untouchable. The room was filled with diplomats, leaders, and officers, an assembly of Galaxy's finest. Lyra's alien beauty and commanding presence had everyone in awe, but not John. He saw through the facade. He knew she believed that humans, with their short history and brute strength, could never match her empire's sophistication. And yet, here he was, assigned to protect her in this fragile alliance. The tension in the room was palpable. Moments before the conference started, the unexpected happened. A piercing alarm echoed throughout the building. The peaceful summit was instantly plunged into chaos. Lyra's eyes widened, her calm exterior cracking for the first time as blaring sirens and flashing lights painted the walls. In an instant, the alien diplomats scattered, leaving Lyra vulnerable. But there was one person left in the room, John. He didn't hesitate. Moving swiftly, he shielded Lyra from the chaos around them. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. But she, Lyra, who had never once acknowledged a human's true strength, stayed still, frozen in disbelief. As they navigated through the hallways, it became clear, Lyra was more than just an ambassador. She was a target, and John was the only one who could protect her. "Do you think I'll save you?" John said, his tone still steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "You should be grateful," he muttered to himself, pushing forward. With his eyes scanning every corner, he moved Lyra to safety. For the first time, he felt something shift between them. She wasn't looking at him with contempt anymore. Her gaze, once sharp and dismissive, softened as she realized the depth of his resolve. "You're saving me?" Lyra whispered, incredulous. "You never thought I could, did you?" John replied, glancing over his shoulder as he led her to a safer room. The weight of his words hung in the air. He wasn't just protecting her physically. He was showing her the strength of humanity, the strength that couldn't be measured by alien technology, but by courage, by sacrifice. As they locked themselves in, the door sealing behind them, John couldn't help but wonder, was this the turning point? Could someone like Lyra, someone who had viewed humans as inferior, finally see the true value of his species? He glanced at her, her eyes now full of respect, a look he hadn't seen before. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And whatever came next, John knew one thing for sure. Humanity would never be underestimated again. John stood in the dimly lit room, staring out the window at the vast expanse of the alien city. The summit had been postponed due to the recent attack, and now, with the chaos subsiding, he found himself alone with Lyra. She stood by the door, her violet eyes fixed on him. The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken words and shifting emotions. Lyra, the diplomat who had once looked at him with disdain, was now looking at him with something else, respect, maybe even curiosity. It was a look he had never expected from her. "You saved my life," Lyra finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I never thought a human would." She paused, her gaze searching his face. "You're not like the others." John turned towards her, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't sure what to say. After all, how could he explain what had pushed him to act? It wasn't just about the mission or the alliance. It was about doing what was right. Protecting someone, even if they didn't ask for it. Even if they had looked down on him before. "You were in danger," he said simply. "And I wasn't going to let you die." Lyra nodded slowly, a small flicker of understanding crossing her face. "I underestimated you," she admitted, her voice tinged with a vulnerability he hadn't expected. "I thought humans were nothing more than weak, primitive beings. But now, I see you are capable of far more." John felt a strange sense of pride in her words, though he didn't let it show. "We're more than just what you see on the outside," he replied, his voice soft. "We may not have the advanced technology or the power you do, but we have something else. Something that makes us strong." Lyra met his gaze, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that felt almost palpable. "And what's that?" she asked, her tone genuine, no longer filled with superiority. "The will to fight. For what's right," John said, his words firm and unwavering. "The belief that no matter how hard the odds, We will always stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. There was a long pause as Lyra processed his words. She stepped closer, her movement hesitant, as if she were testing the waters of a new kind of respect. You have honor, she said quietly, the weight of her words hanging in the air. That's more than I ever gave humans credit for. John nodded, feeling a shift in the air. For the first time, Lyra wasn't looking at him like a tool or a servant. She was looking at him as an equal, and it felt powerful. You're starting to understand, aren't you? John said with a slight smile. Lyra hesitated, but then nodded. I am, she said, her voice tinged with something new, something he couldn't quite place. Maybe we have more in common than I thought. John turned to look out the window again, the weight of their new understanding settling between them. The galaxy was vast, filled with different species, different cultures, and yet, here they were, human and alien, standing on the precipice of something new, something that could change the future of their worlds. He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. As the days passed, John and Lyra found themselves working together more often, their interactions growing from mere politeness to something more profound. The summit was back on track, but the tension in the air was different now, more personal, less political. Lyra, who had once viewed John as just a human soldier, now sought his counsel in matters of strategy and diplomacy. John, for his part, had never imagined he'd be working so closely with someone of Lyra's stature, but it was clear that the respect between them had deepened. One evening, as they sat in a quiet corner of the embassy, Lyra turned to John with a contemplative look. You've shown me the strength of humanity, she said, her voice softer than usual. But now I want to understand what drives it. What makes you humans so resilient? John leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. It's not about strength in the way you think, he said, his gaze drifting to the stars outside. It's about the will to keep moving forward, no matter the odds. We fight because we believe in something greater than ourselves. Our families, our ideals, our future. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, her curiosity piqued. You fight for others? She asked, her tone almost incredulous. John nodded. We fight because we care. We care about those who can't protect themselves, about making the world a better place. It's not about power or domination. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. Lyra was silent for a moment, her gaze lingering on him as she absorbed his words. I've always been taught that power is everything, she said finally. That only the strong survive and thrive. John smiled, but there was no mockery in his expression, only understanding. That's the difference between strength and resilience, he said quietly. Strength is physical. Resilience is emotional. It's the heart that keeps going when the body wants to give up. Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, John saw a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes. I never thought about it like that, she admitted. Perhaps. I've been wrong all this time. John's smile widened, a sense of satisfaction filling him. It's never too late to learn, he said. And sometimes, it takes someone else to show you the way. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him, a rare moment of admiration in her eyes. Maybe there's more to humanity than I gave you credit for, she said quietly, her voice laced with a new understanding. John could feel the weight of the shift between them, a new chapter beginning in their relationship. What had once been an alliance built on duty and distrust was now slowly being transformed into something deeper, something based on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it meant to fight for something greater. As they sat there, the hum of the embassy around them, John couldn't help but wonder, could this new bond between them be the key to a lasting peace? He wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. This was just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them had imagined. The morning after their conversation, John found himself once again accompanying Lyra to a diplomatic gathering. But today, something felt different. The usual formality between them had shifted, replaced by a newfound ease. They weren't just two representatives anymore. They were two people trying to understand each other. As they walked into the meeting room, Lyra turned to him with a soft smile, something that had become rare in her typically stern demeanor. I've been thinking about what you said, she confessed, her voice steady but with a touch of warmth. About resilience and strength. I never realized how much I had relied on power alone. John looked at her, genuinely surprised by her openness. It's never too late to change, he said, a little smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Lyra nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I've spent so long believing that dominance was everything, that without it, nothing else mattered. But now I see that maybe I've missed something important. They entered the room, where various alien representatives and human diplomats were already gathered. The air was thick with anticipation, as the summit was critical for establishing a new intergalactic trade agreement. The weight of the situation wasn't lost on either of them, but for the first time, John could sense a shift in Lyra's approach. She wasn't just playing the game of politics anymore. She was engaging with it in a way that felt more personal. As the discussions began, Lyra spoke with a new tone, calm but firm. She wasn't just presenting facts or making demands. She was listening, truly listening, to the concerns of the other representatives. John could see it in her expression, the way her brow furrowed in thought, the way she respected others' perspectives. It was a stark contrast to the way she had operated before, cold, calculating, and detached. But now, she seemed genuinely invested in finding common ground. Hours passed, and the tension in the room slowly began to ease. The representatives were no longer at odds, their voices no longer raised in frustration. There was an understanding between them now, a shared respect that hadn't been there before. As the summit came to a close, Lyra turned to John, her expression softening. You were right, she said quietly. Strength isn't just about power. It's about understanding. About giving a part of yourself, even when it's hard. John looked at her, seeing her in a new light, one that was no longer clouded by arrogance. Sometimes, it's about showing the world that you don't need to dominate to be strong, he said. Lyra smiled, the first genuine smile John had seen from her since they met. Thank you, John, she said simply, her voice laced with sincerity, for showing me what strength really is. As they walked out of the room together, John couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just the success of the summit that mattered. It was the shift in their relationship, in how they viewed each other, and how they now understood the true meaning of strength. What had started as an alliance born of necessity had transformed into something more profound. They weren't just allies anymore. They were partners in something bigger. The future of their worlds, of their species, now seemed a little brighter, a little more hopeful. The weeks following the summit were filled with more meetings, more discussions, but something had shifted. Lyra and John continued to work side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Lyra, once so reserved and distant, now approached each new challenge with a sense of openness and trust. It wasn't just about intergalactic diplomacy anymore. It was about working together, about understanding each other's values and perspectives. One evening, after a particularly long day of discussions, they sat together in a quiet garden outside the embassy, the stars above them bright against the dark sky. Lyra, as always, looked regal, but there was a calmness to her now that hadn't been there before. Do you ever wonder what the future holds? She asked, her voice soft, almost reflective. John looked up at the stars, the weight of her question sinking in. I think about it all the time, he said. We're at the beginning of something big. A chance for real change. But it's not going to be easy. There's a lot of work ahead of us. Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I've spent my whole life in the shadow of power, she said quietly. But now, I see that real power isn't about dominance. It's about collaboration, about building something lasting together. John looked at her, the sincerity in her words striking him. You've come a long way, he said, his voice warm. I've seen it in you. You've learned to trust, to listen. That's what makes you strong. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with a new light. I never imagined I'd find this kind of strength, she said softly. Not just in the people around me, but in myself. I always thought I had to stand alone, but now I realize that strength comes from standing with others, working towards something greater. John smiled, feeling the weight of her words. I think you're right. We've all been through so much. But if we work together, we can build something that will last. Something that will change everything. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him, a warmth in her eyes that John hadn't seen before. Thank you, John, she said quietly, for showing me the way, for being patient with me when I didn't understand. You've changed me. John's smile widened, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. You've changed too, he said, and I think we're just getting started. The stars above them seemed to shine brighter, as if in agreement with their newfound understanding. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, they both felt ready to face it together. Whatever came next, they knew they would face it as allies, not just in diplomacy, but in life. And that, John thought, was the real victory. As the days turned into weeks, the partnership between John and Lyra became the foundation for something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. The intergalactic treaty they were negotiating was progressing smoothly, but more than that, they had formed an unspoken bond built on trust and mutual respect. One evening, after another long day of talks, they stood at the edge of the embassy's terrace, overlooking the city. The lights below shimmered like stars, but it wasn't the view that held their attention. It was the quiet that had settled between them. "It's strange," Lyra said, breaking the silence. "I've spent so much of my life surrounded by power, but this feels different. I've never felt more alive than I do now, working with you." John turned to face her, his expression softening. "I've never imagined that my role here would go beyond just protecting you. But now, I realize that what we're building isn't just about politics. It's about something bigger, something that could change everything." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the city's glow. "It's about creating a future where both our peoples can thrive. But, more than that, it's about understanding each other, respecting each other's differences, and finding common ground." John stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he asked, his voice steady. "From a simple alliance to something that's truly meaningful. And the work we've done together, it's more than just this treaty. It's about showing the rest of the galaxy that unity is possible, even when it seems impossible." Lyra smiled, her features softening. "And it's about more than just politics. It's about the human spirit, the resilience that you've shown, not just in protecting me, but in believing that we could change the course of history." John glanced at the stars above, a quiet understanding passing between them. "We're stronger together," he said quietly. "And the future we're shaping, it's one where we don't just survive. We thrive." Lyra's smile widened, a rare but genuine expression of joy. Maybe I've been wrong all along. Power isn't everything. It's how we use it, how we share it that makes a difference." John nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "Exactly. It's the strength we find in each other that makes us unstoppable." As they stood there, side by side, the weight of their words settled into the night. They weren't just partners in a diplomatic mission anymore. They were partners in something far greater, the creation of a future that no longer saw them as separate, but as equals. And in that moment, under the vast expanse of stars, they knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. The journey toward a new era of cooperation, understanding, and above all, unity. As the weeks passed, the treaty negotiations were nearing their final stages. The atmosphere in the embassy was charged with anticipation, but there was a sense of calm between John and Lyra that hadn't been there before. Their shared work had bonded them in ways neither had expected. They had gone from political allies to something deeper, something more personal. One afternoon, as the final terms of the treaty were being discussed in the main hall, John found himself alone in the embassy's garden. The soft hum of the city outside was soothing, but his mind kept drifting to Lyra. She had changed so much in the time they had spent together. The woman he had once seen as distant and calculating was now someone he admired, not just for her intelligence or power, but for her growth as a person. Lyra had surprised him at every turn. When she finally joined him in the garden, her expression was more relaxed than usual. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, a soft smile on her lips. "I needed a moment to think," John replied, turning to face her. "I've been thinking too," she said as she stepped closer. "About everything. About how far we've come." John looked at her, noticing the change in her demeanor. The confidence was still there, but it was tempered now with humility. "You've come a long way, Lyra," he said, his voice sincere. "I don't think I could have done it without you," she replied, her gaze steady. "Not just with the treaty, but everything." There was something unspoken between them, a connection that had formed through their shared experiences. John had always believed in the strength of humanity, but now he saw it reflected in Lyra, someone who had once considered herself above it all. "I don't know where we go from here," John said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "Neither do I. But I know this. We've built something. Not just a treaty, but trust. And that's what matters most. John smiled at her, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, the uncertainty didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an opportunity. I agree, he said quietly. And I think we're ready for whatever comes next. The two stood there, the weight of their shared journey hanging in the air. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer felt daunting. They had built a foundation that was strong, not just because of their combined efforts, but because of the trust and respect they had forged together. As the sun set on the distant horizon, they both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger, united, and ready to shape the future in their own image. The final days of the treaty negotiations were upon them, and with it came a mixture of relief and anxiety. John and Lyra had worked tirelessly together, but now they stood at the threshold of something that could change the galaxy. The treaty had been drafted, the terms agreed upon, but there was still one final step: approval from both human and alien leaders. The pressure was immense. John could sense it weighing on Lyra, and though she tried to maintain her usual composed demeanor, he could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. They were standing outside the grand conference room, waiting for the final assembly to begin. The leaders of both sides were gathered inside, the fate of their respective peoples resting on the success of this moment. "You okay?" John asked, his voice softer than usual. Lyra turned to him, offering a faint smile. "I've never been this nervous in my life," she admitted. "I'm used to dealing with power, control, but this feels different." John nodded in understanding. "It's not just power we're dealing with this time. It's trust. And trust takes time, effort, and belief." Lyra's smile grew a little more genuine. "I think you're right. And we've earned that trust, not just in the treaty, but in each other." As they entered the conference room, the tension in the air was almost palpable. The leaders of both sides were seated at a massive table, their faces a mixture of hope and skepticism. John could feel the weight of their gaze, but it didn't faze him. What mattered was the journey they had taken to get here. The work, the understanding, the respect. Lyra stood tall beside him, her posture unwavering. "Today," she began, her voice strong and clear, "we have the opportunity to shape the future, not just for our people, but for the entire galaxy. This treaty is more than just an agreement. It is a testament to what can be accomplished when we put aside our differences and work together." Her words resonated through the room, and for the first time, John could see the leaders around the table leaning in, listening intently. The air was still, charged with anticipation. Lyra continued, "We may come from different worlds, with different customs, different beliefs, but we share a common goal: peace, cooperation, and prosperity for all." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. "It is with that spirit that I ask for your approval, not just for this treaty, but for the future we will build together." John stood silently beside her, the weight of her words settling in. This wasn't just about the treaty. It was about everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed. It was about their belief in something greater than themselves. The room remained silent for a long moment, but then, one by one, the leaders began to nod. The approval was unanimous. The treaty had passed. As the room erupted into applause, John turned to Lyra, his heart swelling with pride. She had done it. They had done it. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's smile was bright, full of warmth. "We did," she replied. "And this is just the beginning." As the applause continued, John couldn't help but feel that, for the first time, they were on the brink of something truly extraordinary. A future built on trust, cooperation, and the strength to face any challenge together. The celebration following the approval of the treaty was nothing short of monumental. People from both human and alien delegations gathered in the grand hall, voices filled with excitement and optimism. John and Lyra stood at the heart of it all, but their thoughts were not on the cheers or the applause. They were on the path that lay ahead. "It's done," Lyra said softly, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the collective joy of their success. "It really is," John replied, his voice filled with a mix of awe and relief. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, taking in the enormity of the moment. They had crossed the threshold, but this was only the beginning of their shared journey. The weight of the responsibility ahead was not lost on either of them. They both knew the road to lasting peace was not as simple as signing a treaty. "What now?" Lyra asked, her gaze shifting to him. What's next for us? John smiled, a hint of warmth in his eyes. We build, he said simply. We take what we've created here, and we make it something real. We make sure this treaty isn't just a piece of paper, but a foundation for a future. Lyra nodded, a sense of determination settling over her. A foundation, she echoed. For our people, for everyone. We'll show them that it's not just about the leaders, it's about the everyday person. The ones who will live the peace we create. John's gaze softened. And it's about showing them the strength that comes from unity, from working together despite our differences. Lyra's smile grew, the warmth in her expression reflecting the hope she felt. I never imagined I'd find something like this. Not just in a treaty, but in us. In what we've built together. John looked at her, a deep sense of pride swelling in his chest. We've done something incredible, Lyra. Together. As they stood there, the celebration continued around them, but it felt distant, as if they were in their own world now. The applause, the cheers, they were all important, but they paled in comparison to the bond they had formed. They were no longer just allies. They were partners in something greater than either of them had ever imagined. A future of collaboration, respect, and peace. The journey ahead would not be easy, but they were ready. They had each other, and together, they would face whatever came next. And as the final notes of the celebration played out, John and Lyra exchanged one last look. One filled with promise, understanding, and the quiet certainty that the future was in their hands. Whatever came next, they would face it as equals, partners, and friends.